It's Tuesday morning. Your 3-point story for Monday is already done, tested, and deployed. Your sprint planning is now irrelevant. If this sounds impossible, you're thinking about development the old way. Today, we're talking about why your backlog-driven workflow is broken and what actually works in modern development. Welcome to Go Into Production.
All right, Wael, we're going to start off with 3 words that I think are going to get you going.
Right.
And that is grooming the backlog.
That will get me going. But it's a good start. Thinking about where are we today, or where were we, and what are some of the practices that we still see today? So those practices are grooming the backlog. What does grooming the backlog really involve? So this involves folks coming together. You'll have the product owner. You'll have pretty much your engineers. Potentially you have your product or project manager, depending on how you're structured. And you're going through doing what? Talking about a story. So now this story that you're about to bring in to your backlog is getting groomed.
Everyone has an opinion about how that story should be worded.
Not only that, how it's supposed to be solved.
Oh, yeah.
And then you see those, one of the things that I always find amusing is that those side conversations in most of the grooming conversations are based on solutioning, but grooming is not about solutioning. That's engineering work. That's
Right.
the actual
Right.
work.
Yeah.
So when you think about it from a perspective of, yeah, don't focus on the solutioning. Let's focus on the grooming. But then that gets into a whole slew of other things.
But that's a key point that
Right.
the engineering, while you have engineers in the room and engineers love engineering, that shouldn't really make it in your backlog, right?
Right.
Like the name of the library that you need or whatever kind of technology you're going to be using, like none of that should be in your backlog,
Right.
because it's not focused on, well, the engineering or the technologies. It's focused on the business.
I like that point. And actually, that's where you want to go. When you're bringing people together from various functions, you want to have, I'm going to say, ubiquitous language.
Yeah.
Let's go back to classics,
Sure.
domain-driven
Yep.
design. But at the same time, it's not a technology conversation. You want experts in the room to ask the right questions. That's the important part. That's
Right.
the engineer's role.
Yep.
The story most likely is going to be something like, we want to add a button, or we need this capability, or we need this feature. Everybody should be able to talk about that in plain English and use the same words, right? Let's name a feature. Let's see. What's a good feature that pops to your mind?
Login, login button.
That's perfect. Let's go with that. A login button. Well, I want a login button, but that speaks into implementation a little bit, right?
Oh, like I went too deep already.
Exactly.
It's more about, because like when I said that, actually, I was thinking that, wait a minute, because like when I just say login, I think about local credentials or federation or something like that, right? And using, other identity sources. Like that is actually the story of login. It's not the button right there. Yeah.
But the moment you say button, you solutioned. And that's the tricky part.
I'm sorry, YL. Didn't mean to.
But this is the reality, right? And then what happens is the conversation turns into, no, we want this button to be blue. We want this button to be this size. We want it to be alignment. We want all these things. But is that really the place for grooming? Or is that
Right.
the conversation that you want to have at grooming?
But it's like I'm almost scared. I would be scared to make it that simple, right?
Right.
Given, I think, the table that you're sitting at, the folks you're sitting with, who are all probably pretty accomplished, and they know they know the product as well as you do, right? And so when you sit at the table, you're bringing your A game. You want to go for it. So it's like sitting there and having some basic conversation about how login should look,
Right.
right? And not so much about how it should work, I guess. it just seems so remedial, so simple.
It does seem so simple, but there's multiple parts that I think that we tend to overlook at simple requests, like login. We talked about a button, but really login has multiple, I'm going to say, dimension to it. You got the user experience part of it. So are you going to go in and, as an engineer, talk about the looks and the colors and the schemas and stuff like that?
Yep.
Well, that's a designer's job, right? It's the designer's job is to come in and say, hey, based on our research, here's the experience we'd like our users to have. That's a conversation.
Right.
Does that change, for example, when it comes to my other favorite part of backlog grooming, you start to point size, or you try to figure out hopefully relatively.
I hate trying to do points.
Oh, me and you are the same.
Everybody's got an opinion about that.
Oh, I'm sure. And I know right now we're stepping on a product or project manager's role.
Yeah.
So a PM is going to come in and be like, no, that matters a lot. But why does it matter? They want to try to figure out velocity. They want to try to figure out take relative thinking and associate it to time.
Burn down, yeah.
Right? Burn down is the exact example.
Yeah.
Why do we even burn down? Is it just to get through stories? Well, that's our job anyway. But it's just to see how fast can we go through stories so we could say, yep, we could be done by this time frame, or we could definitely meet this deliverable.
Yeah.
Right.
So thinking about that, and thinking about how you're going to. So, I guess what I'm seeing is when I look in the backlog, instead of relying on points and relying on this is what we can get done in a sprint based on the points, it's more about holistically understanding what this story is and why you want it. And because you understand what's going on there, you're going to put it in the sprint, and you're just not going to worry about a lot of points there. But earlier we were talking about you had an idea called thin slices, right? And I love this idea that you had for it. So tell me more about that, because I think that kind of plays into choosing story points versus putting a big story in the backlog or whatever it may be. Tell me about thin slices.
Yeah. So the idea of thin slices is years of thinking about how do you communicate value. And these years of thinking about how do you communicate value tend down, or kind of, you could kind of summarize it and really come down to a simple thought. You want a vertical value add that's vertical, that allows you to get to a certain thing you can, in a way, tangibly touch.
Right.
Now, tangibly, obviously, in computer science is a debatable term. Everything is digital. Everything is like, maybe I can see it, maybe I won't, depending on that.
Yeah.
Does that add value, or is it tangible? Debatable. So we won't go there. But the idea there is like, how is that different? So vertical slice, it says, I need a single atomic value add that cuts across all your layers. So the end of a sprint delivers functional capability, not necessarily, I'm going to throw this out there and I know it's going to probably ruffle feathers. It's not necessarily going to be something like, oh, my infrastructure is ready. Well, great. Or my entire sprint was spent on standing up a database.
Right.
When you really think about that particular correlation or comparison, what's the value after that sprint? I got a database. Yeah, but we got a lot of automation these days.
Yeah.
Does it actually take?
Well, that feature was 4 sprints. So yeah, the first one was just the database.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So this is where I start to debate on, you don't think of it like that. Don't think of it as, we have an epic. First part of an epic is to stand up infrastructure, to stand up a database. Really, I think about it like this. I think about it as the first thin slice is a single user value. So let's go back to the button example.
Yeah.
The login.
Yeah, that's good.
Don't add button. What's the value that we want? We want a user to be able to authenticate. So I want to know that they've authenticated. I need to know who you are. How we implement it, that's the work. That's the details.
Right.
Designers are going to go in and say, well, here's the user experience that we need to go after. Engineers are going to say, All right, for us to do that, we need style sheets, we need, HTML, CSS, and all those things, right? And then we also need the behavior behind it on the logic, the business logic to make it happen.
Right. Yeah.
But here's where it gets interesting, because right away you thought about something interesting. You started to think about federations and single sign-on and things like that. But it depends on the industry. If I'm using or if I'm developing against a customer-facing application, my authentication is going to be in the realms of your classic credential, passwordless. We hear about those today.
Right.
There's a lot of other things to consider, like, are we going to use Okta? Are we going to use social logins? So the idea of just saying a button not only skewed the conversation up front,
Right.
but it also kind of hinted on the direction already.
Okay, so
Right.
I want to see if I'm hearing this correctly.
Yeah.
Instead of a story about the user being able to log in these different ways, right? These different identity sources are supported, or third-party identities are supported, and local identities, email, password.
Yeah.
Those are supported. Instead of a story talking about that, which would inevitably take quite some time,
Of
right?
course.
Because you've got authentication, you've got authorization, and you've got the interaction with the handshakes with the third parties and all that.
Right.
That's a lot.
That's a lot of work.
So what you're saying is the thin slice here would be, look, this is our product, so we care about authentication and then authorization, right? In that order. Those are the things that we care about. Whether or not you're using a third party for identity, you still have to go through our authorizations.
Right.
So your thin slice here is create that first, right?
Well, actually, let me put it to you in slightly different than that. When you have a room that's talking about product designers and engineer, so this goes back to the balanced thinking. This is another thing that we've learned through the many, many years. We need to have a balanced conversation. When you're coming up with a story, and this is why I hate the concept of grooming, it's more like the concept of product development. We shouldn't be talking about this at grooming. We should be talking about this as we're building the product. The thing that you want to go after is there's multiple perspectives on how to narrow down that story. So let's kind of take a stab at it. We're going to put on different hats here. So the first hat is going to be the user experience. This is where most likely the designer with the product owner discussing how that's going to look like. They're going to say something like, hey, this is a customer-facing thing. What we care about is our user being able to come in using passwordless authentication. Yes, there's technology in that conversation because we can't get away from digital
third-party identity
conversations.
providers, but they don't care about that. It's just log in with Google, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But that's the experience.
Yeah. I went deep again.
Right. So that's the experience. In a room when we have everybody talking about it. So if they came up to you and said, hey, we need this experience. We want to be able to have our users log in with Google, for example. That's the language that they want to come in talking about.
Yeah.
Engineers look at that and say, okay, so you want us to have a third-party relationship with some social media, which is Google.
Right.
Okay, now I'm starting to think about
Yeah.
the technical complexity, right? Now you got the PM going in and saying, okay, what's going to block us from that happening, right? How are we going to make this happen? Engineers are going to be like, well, we need to figure out the documentation. We need to talk to the...
Yeah.
Yeah, you see, like everything starts to come back together because that's the right conversation. Then the story is what? It hasn't changed from what the product owner and designer talked about, right?
is the business value.
It's the business value.
Right.
Or the user value, actually. It's not necessarily the business value, because some might argue that. It's the value to the user that the business wants to support.
Okay, so there are two thoughts that I have here.
Go for it.
First is I can definitely tell that you're trying to facilitate with the idea of thin slices. You're trying to facilitate rapid iterations.
Yes.
I can definitely see that.
Of course.
And then when I think about rapid iterations, I start thinking about writing tests. And instead of, because I'm 100% guilty of supporting test-driven development and not doing test-driven development.
Right.
I will usually write the code before I write the tests, right? And the problem is it ends up like you create the thing, it works, now you see what it is, and then you go back and you write some pretty elaborate tests, right? And I try to code in a way that, I know testing will be easy, but so with thin slices, tell me about these things. With fast iteration, how does it help? Because I think it does. And testing, just how does it, help simple, easy, straightforward testing?
So because with thin slice, we narrowed down to a value. So it's not very open and generic. It's not like I need to have social media authentication. We actually narrowed it down to say we just want Google right now. Or we want Microsoft, or we want some other third party, right? The idea there, when you go to think about the test, is very concrete. So I'm going to start with, and I know this is probably going to ruffle some feathers because it's going to sound difficult, but it's
very controversial today.
It's very, very. But the thing is like, I hear the arguments and I understand them, but we also have to think about the value that we get out of it. When I start with my journey test, it's very clear. I'm going to start with the login page. The login page has to allow something.
Give me the 2 seconds on a journey test.
Oh, yeah. So
I know units, I know integration. Journey's a bit of a new one for me.
So we talked about a user experience. The user is going to go on a journey through an experience. And that experience is we want to see end to end their ability to log in. So now when you write that journey test, you're very narrowly focused. I need to present something. They need to land somewhere. They need to be presented with something. And then that something needs to succeed. Does it worry about the details behind it? Not really. That's why it's simpler to write. And there's far few of them.
Right.
Because I'm not worried about the integration testings and all the, the unit testing and mocking and all that. No, I'm actually trying the experience. On the web is a lot easier than mobile and other devices. But when you think about it from a web perspective, I landed somewhere. I can make that happen. I don't need to have elaborate stuff going on.
Right.
So the idea of writing that journey test is easy. And then you validate the implementation. And because you come back to this journey test.
Back to this thin, this all plays in together. Back to the thin slice. The thin slice was purposefully small. Therefore, the end-to-end test here, the journey test, is small test. Right. And now you have authentication and authorization. You have the basics. You didn't spend a lot of time. You just got the basics there.
Exactly.
That story's done.
Exactly.
And now you move on to the next ones.
Right.
So you don't have these big things. I got it. Okay.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I'm definitely, as I go into my next backlog, I'm going to be thinking about that in a different, more modern way.
Right.
Thin slices and the journey, and stop trying to engineer my way through everything.
Oh, definitely, definitely. Next episode, we'll explore how developer roles themselves are transforming and how AI is contributing to that transformation. Thanks for listening to Go Into Production podcast. If you haven't, please consider subscribing, and we'll see you next time.